mulher.
Se,
Porém,
se,
por quê?
se,
De quem?
se,
O quê?
se,
Porém,
se,
por quê?
se,
De quem?
se,
O quê?
se,
Porém,
se,
por quê?
se,
Se desse.
Tom Zé is a Brazilian singer-songwriter and musician who was influential in the Tropicalia movement in the late 60s, which in turn, well, it's something that I found out about through doing this series of reviews. It was a cultural and artistic movement, particularly had some political slants to it, so it was opposed to the military regime that came in the 60s in Brazil. And I've come to it through the musical side of things. It produced good music, a lot of which could be labelled samba. So Tom Zé made quite a bit of mileage out of being a country boy in a big city and by doing wry observational songs about the cities. He also had a particularly experimental approach to the music that he produced. However, when the movement faded, he became more obscure, and I gather that he practically retired from music until in the 1990s, David Byrne, who was the lead guy from Talking Heads, went to Rio and discovered one of his albums, and then released through his own label, released some of Tom Zé's stuff. So he's had a resurgence in popularity as a result of that. Wikipedia lists 28 albums by him, including live and compilations. His first one was in 1968, and he is still active. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is my first encounter with Tom Zé. So therefore with this album, and it's his, I believe, fifth album. And this is the album that David Byrne discovered when he was on a trip to Rio. Yeah, I can get why he liked this album when he found it. He was apparently attracted to the cover, first of all, and kind of bought a copy and then listened to it and loved it. So about Tom Zé, I haven't had a whole amount of information. I don't dig, I dig a certain amount in when I'm looking into the people who are doing the music and the music itself. From the pictures and the stuff that I've come across, he's an almost clown-like character at times. He seems to like putting paint on himself. The music is, I would describe it as light and airy samba. Now, I'm not very versed in Latin music, so I take the fact that it's samba from the title of the album, which I think means studies of samba or samba, sorry, or a study of samba. There's a lot of acoustic guitars in here and other similar instruments and Latin rhythms and percussion going on. Some of the stuff that's used in the music is quite unusual. There's a typewriter appears as a rhythm instrument here, which is interesting. I quite like the track Talk, which has got it starts by having one note repeatedly played on some kind of guitar-like instrument. Not quite sure what that is. All of it's recognisable as certainly as Latin rhythms and Latin feel to it. Is very varied though within that, and it does have this kind of experimental feel to it. It's not jarring in the way that some experimental things are. It's not discordant, but it just plays with different textures, and it's an exploration more than anything else. The vocals are very laid back. I presume they're in Portuguese, seeing as this is Brazil. I wouldn't be able to tell you, definitively that it's not Spanish, for example. And some of the singing has kind of got a kind of really laid back French cafe kind of feel to it. Kind of, yeah. And there's some of it is kind of singing with several people singing at once. Tropicalia, so the movement as a whole, the music that I've come across in it, always seems to have this gentleness to it, which is initially has surprised me, and I still kind of wonder about this because when you have music that's associated with some kind of movement or some kind of politics, normally it feels more angry. than this, and this does not feel angry at all. It's definitely got a kind of feel of humour to it. And in fact, it feels like the songs might be comic in if you understood the words, which I don't. Um, but there's this lightness and gentleness to the Brazilian samba stuff that's come through the Tropicalia that I've heard so far that I really like. So I really enjoyed this. It's an interesting album. As I say, it's light but in a good way. It's possibly even better if you understand Portuguese. And if anybody knows what any of these songs are actually about, then please do let me know. Um, and I have to say, there's nothing in this movement that I've heard so far through this list that I didn't like, but this is one of the best ones that I've heard so far. So I really enjoyed it. And as always, at this point, I'd like to invite you to tell me what you think of this album. So please do by leaving a comment. That's it from me for now.